If I never make it back home, yes, it was meant to be. I've been sent by the Lord with the destiny. I'm chasing demons out of this land under authority of God's right hand, and I've been down this road a time or two at least. And I'm not giving up for angel, man, nor beast, 'cause I'm a devil chasing son of a gun. Ain't giving up till the good Lord comes back to get me and take me home. I'm part of God's army. Here we come.
Steel horse I ride, and I'm wanted.
That's so damn.
Dead or alive.
Okay.
Got that stuck in my head tonight, Vic.
Fun
How you doing, sister?
Oh, dude, I'm not going to lie. I've got some serious chronic fatigue going on this week, so I'm operating on caffeine and prayer.
Dude, I was counting on you to help me stay awake. I was about an hour ago. I was like, oh, dude, I am so tired for a show tonight. But hey, Vic, this is what we're gonna snap out of it. Are you ready?
I'm totally ready. I actually, man,
harder.
I feel like an old lady. I actually took a nap before the show, which I've never done, but I was so tired. But I'm going to be stoked as soon as our guest comes on, because I have been literally looking forward to this for weeks, and I think we're going to have a great conversation here. So I'm going to perk up here in about T-minus 3 minutes.
Okay, no, that's awesome. And so excited about this. Yes, we have a guest coming on. I want to make a few announcements, get those out of the way, and then we're going to get right into the show. So, folks, throughtheblack.com is the website. That's where you can find all of our junk, all of the links, all of the things, okay? So, yes, and you can find our archives. You can find the links to the Rust teaching. You can find the resources. You can find our DVDs and T-shirts. We have a T-shirt company called Ezekiel 8. It's about exposing darkness, okay? Check this out. This is our Resist shirt, okay? And it's about resisting Satanism and everything they do. Speaking about resisting Satanism and everything they do, one of the things they do is kill babies in New Mexico. So we have a new website called nomoredeadbabies.com, and you can go over there and get a free shirt. We want you to do that. We have hundreds of shirts actually on the way. They've been ordered, okay? But it's not too late for you to get a shirt, okay? So if you go to that website, order the shirt. Hey, keep an eye out for an email if you've ordered a shirt, because we had a few glitches or problems with the website. Not sure what's going on, and we may not have gotten your payment for the shipping, okay? The shipping is $7, and that's anywhere in the USA. Just keep an eye out for that. That helps us cover, getting it sent out to you. We've had some amazing sponsors, okay? Coach Dave and others, Justin Brown, Mike Spalding, Neil Peterson from Harvest Revival Center, people that are helping us out, Shake and Wake Radio, who are helping us getting the word out about the shirts. We also had a bunch of signs made up, okay? So, and I'll show, the sign doesn't really show up. Okay, there it is. And this is a yard sign that will go in your yard. Now, sorry, we haven't even looked into shipping these out yet. Somebody asked if we could just ship out the plastic part. Yes, we can, and we will. You just have to email us, and we will do that anywhere USA, okay? So, anyway, nomoredeadbabies.com is the website. And guys, it's more than just wearing T-shirts and putting up signs. This is a prayer campaign, and we're asking you to join us in intercessory prayer and pray. The number one prayer is, Lord, use me. Use me to save a baby. Use me to reach somebody. Lord, I pray that you would stop baby murder. I pray that you would just intervene and save these babies and use me. So that's what's going on, guys. And we're still taking orders on those T-shirts. But Vic, super cool. This is pretty much last regular show of the year. before 2024 comes up, and we're going out basically on a high note here. Tell us about our guest tonight and how you found out about him, and let's bring him on.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know, I do quite a bit of podcasts throughout the week and over the course of this last year. And one of my favorite podcasts, because they invite me back over and over again, and they are so kind and gracious to me, is Brandon and Lindsay over at the Unrefined. Tom, do you know those guys? Do you know Brandon and Lindsay?
I met them. Yeah, they're awesome. And I was
Okay.
on that podcast.
I thought so. Okay, but I wasn't sure. Well, anyway, I think the last time I was on there, usually Sandy's back there in the IT booth, right? But the last time I was on, they had BT, and I don't even know if BT really said much, but they were introducing me on his behalf and had all sorts of accolades, and were really excited just about his testimony. And just from what little I heard, I'm not going to spoil anything, but from what little I heard, I thought this is a perfect guest for Through the Black. Our audience and our live chat is going to love him. And I just think this is going to be really encouraging. If we rewind all the way back to, I think, the very first show of 2023, if not one of the first, remember the year of the bull, Tom?
Yes.
And we were saying how 2023 is how we were going to, really consciously make some changes. We weren't going to just go with the status quo. And so here we are ending with the No More Dead Babies campaign. And we've got BT on here to hopefully inspire you guys. Hey, it doesn't matter if it's December and you haven't come up yet with that year of the bull epiphany in your life. It's never too late. We're going to get in here and the new year is about to start. So I'm really hoping that this guest is going to encourage people to not lose sight of Russ's vision and Russ's work and what we're doing here. There is still a lot of work to be done. And I think tonight will be encouraging because there are people out there in the occult that Jesus Christ loves, and he knows their names and he's after them. And so we don't get to hear these kind of stories very often. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce BT.
Hey, thank you for joining us tonight, BT. Can you hear us okay?
And now we have the slow internet issue.
Oh gosh. Always tech issues.
Hi, guys.
Always tech issues.
Always.
Well, BT, thank you so much for coming on the show. And this is the first time I actually get to see you face to face because you were behind the scenes doing the heavy lifting the last time we were together. But I would love it if we could just dive into the deep end and you could give us a little bit of your story, your background, your testimony.
Sure.
Yeah, let's just start there.
And I'm not sure what's going on, if he's froze up or what. So,
okay.
So anyway, we know how this goes, folks. Okay, we got audio now. There we go. Okay, yeah, go ahead and jump right in there, BT.
Sure. Sorry if anybody lost any of that. So I'm BT from Truth and Shadow podcast. Yeah, and that's what I'm doing now. But I started a long time ago. I was raised in a Pentecostal, spirit-filled, tongue-speaking, non-denominational style community. That's what I was brought up in on Sundays. That was pretty much it. I would go to church on Sundays, and then I was left to my own devices for the rest of the week. and that was about as efficient as fishing without a lure, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I grew up that way, and we went to church, and I was raised basically going to church with my grandma and my grandfather at the time, and they were great. They taught me and instilled in me that I'm supposed to live the Christian values, etc. As a kid, pray to Jesus, accept him into my heart, Lord and Savior, and all of the regular things that everybody probably goes through as a kid in a Christian household. And it was when I was around 14, 15, they were actually getting a divorce And it was a real interesting thing because that household held a no tolerance for divorce. They didn't, if they heard that the pastor of a church was a remarried or a divorced individual, they wouldn't attend that church at all. They would make sure other people knew, etc. So it became this big scandal. And it's like, here I am, 14, 15, and these are the only ones that have taught me about Jesus. And they're getting the one thing that they held as unacceptable.
Wow.
And I didn't know what to do with that.
And yeah, folks, anyway, just to stop us from having some dead air here, looks like
between them.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry if there's any loss in air time there. So
that's okay. Just keep going. You're doing great. And we are having some glitches, but the last thing we heard was your grandparents, right, were getting a divorce.
Right.
And you were just kind of coming to terms with that.
Trying to come to terms with it. You know, I grew up in a household that was broken, twice divorced before, you know, my mother and so on. But now I'm seeing literally a Christian household that said that this is an unacceptable thing. Do it themselves. And this drove me basically into the arms of agnosticism, I'll call it. And in the opportunity of being an agnostic, you didn't have a whole lot of friends to choose from anymore. And I started hanging out with the goth crowd, which oddly enough, as dark as that sounds, they were probably the most welcoming and accepting individuals that I'd ever met in my entire young teenage years.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter who you were, where you came from, what you did, etc. You know, you could fit in with the goth. Well, you know, I started talking to guys. They would do things on lunch breaks, you know, tarot, talk about Ouija board, you know, just things that the goth people were into. And I didn't understand any of those at the time until I started asking questions. And we had a really nicely equipped occult shop, more like a new age store, you know, the candles and the incense and the handful of books and all the things. And I began to be interested in the new age movement right around that time of being 15. I bought my first book, how to ride a broomstick, I think it was called, by Silver Raven Wolf. And it was the jumping off point. It was basically from there that I began the journey into the sinister. I call them sinister forces today. Back then it was simply the real spirits, right? I mean, you know, the Christian stuff is all make believe, of course. Pagan stuff is older, so it's more true. Well, that began to not really work out because I wasn't getting any highs or any kind of dopamine from any of these like little practices that the books teach you how to do, you know, burn this candle for this thing. And I wasn't getting any of these things. And so I started seeking out things that were a little bit more esoteric in nature, reading books, Israel Regardie, reading the Kybalion. It's a book by some hermeticists, acclaimed. This, that, and the other thing. And it led me further into ritual magic. And the difference between Wicca and ritual magic is Wicca is kind of like, hey, burn this candle, light these things, and call your particular lord and lady, and you get what you want. Ritual magic was, here's some steps to follow them, and then journal your results, and then repeat it and journal your results. Basically a science, if you will. So the practice of magic using scientific means to make sure what you're getting was the same result each time. And I don't know, I began experimenting with with what's called sigil magic in my early 20s. And for the listeners who might not know, or the audience who might not know what sigils are, they're basically occult lock and key for accessing particular entities tied to the specific power associated with the emblem or the sigil. And I had begun talking to this guy whose grandma, oddly enough, came from back east, the Appalachian Mountains, and I didn't have any understanding of what that meant really until quite a while after experiencing this. But this guy told me, oh, well, you want grave dust. You go to the graveyard and you get some dust off the tombstones or headstones and use that instead to form your sigils, and you'll start getting a little bit more power out of what you're doing. And okay, so I start trying to find a quiet place to do this. You know, your bedroom isn't really exactly a quiet place because your mom can come home, or your brother, your sister's there. So there was a nice patch of forest that was on the other side of a fence that butted against a farmer's field. And I didn't know at the time, but until I started exploring in that farmer's field, forest area was their family graveyard.
Oh.
Centuries, whatever, old family graveyard.
Oh, wow.
And, the trees kind of grew gnarled and kind of weird in that area too. And that became my playground. And that's kind of where I began experiencing some of the more dark things. I liked to draw at the time, and so I was drawing things that were coming to my imagination from these experiences. But it wasn't just that. I had started to pull away from other people. I would go to work and I'd come home. I'd go to work, I'd come home. I'd have my days off and go out to the woods, etc. I began to get more pallid, really pale skin. My eyes started getting real sunk into my skull kind of things, This is... and then depression really kicked in, because I would go and I would try for hours to do these things and I wasn't getting any response. And then I started getting these prompts in my imagination that were not like my kind of imagination, the way that I talk to myself. Some people have the internal dialogues, other people don't. But I have an internal dialogue, where I talk through things to myself. But it was like I was getting this other, more grumbly, hatred-filled voice that was telling me to like cut myself, and I would do that, and that would bring like dopamine rush. And it went to some real low levels depression.
BT, I want to continue on with where you're at, but I want to back up just for a second. We've talked about sigil magic on this show before, and just we've explained it to people who would never have an interest in doing it, but wonder what it is. Okay. Because we hear of this stuff out there, and it could be the neighbor's kids. It could be your grandkids or somebody in your family that's getting involved in this. So we did a show explaining what is sigil magic.
Good.
And I like the way that you explained it, like a lock and key type of access to demonic presence. Okay, we would call it demonic presence as believers. So I wanted to ask, where did you get your sigils from? Did you make them up yourself, or did you find them in a book?
So the way it started for me is I got a hold of a copy of Ars Legamentum. It's the Lesser Key of Solomon. Oh. You can get, it's probably the second most common thing out there than the Ouija board. It's just not written by Hasbro, right? But the Lesser Key of Solomon lists out sigils, which, tie in what a specific entity's key is, and it's always in a circle, and I take that circle as a lock. So that's why I call it a lock and key. You have to take the sigil and kind of turn, make it into a working device. And the Ars Legimatum is designed to summon up specifically whatever the Solomonic or Solomon demons were. And so each of those sigils is specifically tied to the entity associated with it. But as time goes on and you start understanding, or you're starting to get influenced by other entities, you start making them yourself. And there's guides for this typically found nowadays in, I think there was a Scott Cunningham book that was out a few years ago that shows it's a rose with the Hebrew letters on it or English letters, and you trace out the name of the thing, and you take that and you put that into your circle, and you can use that for sigil making. And that's what I ended up learning how to do, and then I ended up just making my own from what was known as automatic writing. So I just draw it out, automatic writing style, and then I put a circle around it. And that was my interaction with sigil magic.
So you said this area that was a cemetery ended up being your playground. Did you begin to notice anything happening? Like, I guess what I want to ask is, did you notice like you were having any power or success in practicing this?
The only thing that I felt like I was gaining is if I told someone to leave me alone, they would leave me alone. I mean, I don't understand if that was really anything other than it was like, leave me alone, and I'd get left alone, or it didn't seem to be any special powers. It was more like I became an object. I became an object of a thing to hate. Is more like my experience was, as opposed to gaining some kind of supernatural power. I did bring home something one time, and that led to, missing. I'm sorry if you can hear the dogs; they're rampant.
No problem.
People are home. Anyways, I brought home I brought something home that would move plates around the house, or stuff would get put somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. We'd find flatware in drawers that we don't put anything except for greeting cards, for example, and things like that just didn't seem normal. Not we're not talking about any kind of like poltergeistic activity where we're seeing things fly across the house, but mischievous, elfish material kind of things.
BT, I'm curious, and I don't know what sort of a time frame this is, but and I also don't know how real observant we are as teenagers of things. As you're progressing along and you're not really getting much bang for your buck, and your personality is changing, and you're depressed and you're becoming more isolated, what continued to drive you forward through what was seemingly not really working?
Right. So I left Wicca when I was around 18, 19 years old, and started getting into this other stuff when I was in my early 20s. And so I'm around 25 when I really start heavily reading Aleister Crowley, Israel Regardie, Lon Milo Duquette. These are the heavy hitters within the Golden Dawn and Order of Thelema style ritual magic. This is the deep stuff that is accessible to anybody, but usually requires some level of guidance, either from another person or from another thing, right, to gain a deeper understanding of. Yeah. And this is the time that stuff wasn't working for me. Whatever it was supposed to do, I wasn't gaining the access to it. And so I started using grave dust and sigil magic and calling out to spirits. The closest thing that I have found and discussed with Dr. Judd Burton about this was actually what he termed the primal witch, and it seemed to fit more with what I was experiencing. Wicca is not witchcraft. Well, Wicca is witchcraft, but not all witchcraft is Wicca. And this stuff was, think of the Witch of Endor, and she had her own summoning pit, an Ove it was called, and this is the kind of thing I was walking into step by step whether intentionally, consciously, or unintentionally, I don't know.
Mm.
Was there any red flags going up for you? You know, just like any voice of reason or your conscience even telling you like, hey, maybe you shouldn't be doing this?
Not for a long time. Not until somebody just told me that you don't look well. I had a friend coworker simply say, you need to look, you look like you need to take a couple days off. You don't look well. And I think it was the first time that I saw myself in the mirror and I was not, well, you know, your reflection, you get used to seeing your reflection. I didn't see myself anymore. And it was about that time, I was about 28, when I start really picking up the Bible again. I'm reading it as an agnostic, really. You know, there wasn't anything for me to atheate. You know, I still believed that there was a God. I just simply felt that there were other gods too. You know, other spiritual entities that I could, you know, I can go through them, right? And this is, you know, I'm reading the Bible. I'm reading that there are, you know, Deuteronomy 32. There are other things out there, and I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, Deuteronomy 32, the sons of God. Yeah, I got that because, you know, I'm working with an entity that claims it's a god. I kind of worship it like a god. Okay, I could see that, and you know, I'm reading. It wasn't until I was about almost 30. I was about 29, almost 30, and I had a dream one night. Grandma had one of those vinyl chairs. It's that green color from like the 70s. Everybody's seen them, I think. And I had this dream. I was laying on that bed, and my grandma was tucking me to sleep. And that's when she said, she asked me this question. She goes, I know you accepted Jesus, but when are you going to be baptized? And I remember saying to my grandma, well, when I'm 30. Jesus was 30 when he was baptized. I'm going to do that. And so she says, okay, I'll hold you to that. And here it is getting really close. And so that prayer, that dream, sent me into praying, and I started to pray to God. And this is when I was probably at my weakest. I'm working at a gas station. You know, I'm praying to God, asking for him to send somebody to just invite me to their church. That's all it needs. I just send someone, invite me to a church. And I'm working at a gas station, and there's this Catholic seminary that's like 20 miles away. And every once in a while, one of the seminarians would come in and get gas and go, you know, on their way to town or whatever. And this one particular night, it's 9:30. I'm going to close the gas station. We close the gas station at 10, but there's really nobody between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. So I'm getting ready. I'm counting money, and this seminarian comes in, says, hey, you going to church? I says, no, man, it's not for me. And he goes, well, why don't you just come to my church? I'm over here, St. Ed's. I says, okay, sure, man. Blow him off, right? This happens 2 more times in the span of a couple of months. So in a month, he comes back, and then 2 months later, he comes back and says, hey, I haven't seen you at church. Come to church. And so kind of hits me really hard. I've been working in the occult world where 3s are actually a real powerful thing. You have to do something 3 times, and it's usually more powerful. So it struck a chord with me. And so this is where I began my journey. I start going to church, start getting involved with the local community, start feeling better about myself, feeling happy again, feeling joy again, feeling not just emotionally well, but entirely well. And the Easter Sunday, 3 weeks before my 30th birthday, I was baptized. And that was 11 years ago.
Wow. You know, I'm just thinking, I guess I've never thought of this verse in this context before. You grow up hearing the verse where Jesus says, whoever comes unto me, I will in no ways cast out. You know, in other words, Jesus doesn't have this little popularity club where if you come to him, he decides whether or not you're good enough for him. Like, if you come to me and you call on me, I'll take you. I've never seen that in the context of contrasting that to people who are seeking the devil or seeking demonic power. And it sounds like, from what you're talking about, I mean, we know that there are people that pursue magic who become very adept at it, and they become very knowledgeable, and they get in the club and they raise the ranks. And there's other people that sit and do all of the things, and all they do is get sick and lonely and depressed, and they aren't given the power. They don't get the payoff. And it's really showing me a contrast, how Jesus takes whoever comes to him, regardless of what giftings they have or what they have to offer. And I'm seeing that now as a contrast to the devil, who he doesn't take everybody who comes to him, even if it means someone who can belong to him and worship him. He rejects people. He's getting a lot of people coming to him who already feel rejected.
Yeah.
And I mean, if on top of that, you're also getting rejected from the very God you're trying to serve, what a whammy, you know? So it's also very intriguing to me. I love the way that God comes to us in ways that we understand. And the fact that he came to you 3 times because that was significant to you in where you were at. And, you know, that should be controversial for a Christian to hear. Like, why is Jesus conforming to an occult belief? Of course, we see him doing it with Peter. We see that 3 in scripture as well. So who knows which came first, the chicken or the egg there. But I just think it's cool that Jesus comes to us and presents himself to us in a way that we will recognize that something spiritual is happening, even if he's using means that would be recognizable by someone in the occult.
BT, I can think of a million things I want to ask you, but from, you know, you say it's been 11 years, and I guess I want to get your reaction to the last 5 years, because I think in the last 5 years we've seen an emerging of people coming out and openly with, you know, boldness and pride, saying they are involved in the occult like never before. Now, when I was growing up, we would hear about these things, but nobody would want to come out and admit this openly. Okay. It wasn't that it was a shameful thing, but it was a secret thing. But people could be shamed if they were doing this. Like, okay, dude, you're a devil worshiper, you're in the occult, that's not cool. Okay. It wasn't a popular thing to do. It's very fashionable these days. And we have things like the Satanic Temple, who most of those people involved don't even know what they believe, or, you know, what the Satanic Temple believes, or what kind of Satanists they are, or any of this. We see just people are just willing to do anything to hate God. Okay. So I guess I want to ask, first of all, what is your response to, you know, and I'm wondering if where you are, you're seeing it like I am. I live in a small town, and I'm seeing especially just Satanists, coming out and basically wearing their colors with pride.
Or wearing pride colors, right?
Yeah, that too.
That too.
Yeah, well, and then, you know, just to back you up, the Satanic Temple boasts of over 50% of their membership being involved with the LGBTQ.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, anything that can perverse the image of God is a desired outcome in that. This is what I learned when I was in some really dark times. What I learned, you're absolutely right, Vicky. Some people want to go after Satan. That's who they want to go after, but there's more than just him. Satan's got 5 dudes on his, 5 to 7 guys on his table at any given time that are designed to divide up territory. They're territorial spirits that want to conquer the world. Yeah, they want to do it for themselves. They can't have a conversation like we can, where we can just talk to each other. I could talk to Vicky, I could talk to Tom. They hate each other. They hate each other with such levels of vengeance and vehemence that you can't even relate to it. And that spills into who we are as imagers of God. They envy us, ultimately. They envy the fact that you and I will one day see God for all eternity. The fact that we can have this normal conversation, that we can be concerned about how we treat each other, how we can love somebody else. But it's ultimately the fact that those entities, Satan and his minions, the sinister forces, as I call them on my show, the fact that we will one day see God for all eternity is something that they envy for us. And Tom, earlier you were doing your advertisement for No More Dead Babies. Satan and his minions, the biggest thing that they want to do is have us commit murder of the innocent child, to deprive them, the one who kills, to deprive them, the murderer, from the possibility of ever seeing God.
Oh.
Right. The whole point is to make people just not ever be able to see God. And so if you commit murder and you're not repentant, what happens, right?
Right. Hey, I saw something in here, and I want to kind of throw it out there.
Go ahead, Tom.
And I don't think that I have taken this very seriously until the last year, and that is the impact of a book and film series like Harry Potter. Okay. So I've never really said too much about this, and I don't know a lot about it. I've seen a few of the movies years ago. It seemed to be all fantasy and not really based on real life magic, most of it. Okay. I mean, there's some stuff there, but the problem is it piqued the interest of a generation like never before.
Absolutely.
And especially the generation that was unchurched. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you see that impact?
Do I see the impact of novels on potential non-Christian paganism? Is that the question? Would that be the best way?
I mean, but the phenomenon of Harry Potter specifically.
Well, it's not just Harry Potter. V.C. Andrews writes a lot of books. It's vampires, it's werewolves, it's demons, dragons. It's the whole gambit. It's not simply Harry Potter. Harry Potter is like milk to these kids. It's a stepping stone. It's the diving board into the deep. Perfect. That's a perfect generational term for us older guys, isn't it? It's a gateway drug into some deeper stuff. It can potentially lead people. They're unchurched. They're either agnostic or the atheist. They're going to go become maybe members of the Church of Satan, which has groups to meet their needs, either atheist or theist.
So, and that's kind of why I've not talked about it a whole lot over the years on the show. Is Harry Potter in itself is people are going to get mad at me for saying this, and I'm not making light of this, and it's not that I'm not taking it seriously, but it's harmless in comparison to some other stuff out there. But it's not harmless because it's a gateway drug to, opening up doors to this whole world of things that is very, very real. So anyway, I didn't mean to go down that too much, right. But I did want to get your response.
No, it's really intelligent to perceive possible attacks from the enemy. That's the goal as Christians, to have the gift of discernment, right? That's the ultimate thing. It's a God-given ability to discern graces, if you will, to see where something might be from God or might not be from God, Yeah.
So, right. BT, my mind is kind of blown right now. I'm still mulling over what you were saying about the burning with envy over the fact that we get to see God, something the average Christian totally takes for granted and doesn't really think about a lot as much as we should. But, I guess I've always kind of thought, because of the sermons that I've heard and because of what I assume to be true about demons, is that they just hate God so much that that's why they want to ruin everything. How do we square the double-mindedness of beings that hate God so much that they want to destroy everything, but then underlying that hatred is this desire to see him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good question. That's something that I've had to come to grips with, looking back and experiencing the things that I had found and later on have researched since then. The ability of these beings, they are an intellect. They're either spirit or whatever they are. I'm going to say they're spirit, and I'm going to say that they have an intellect. Pure spirit's pure mind. And that means that we can psychoanalyze the subject, but understand the subject will always lie. It will always tell us lies whenever we ask it a question. It's going to make there, if you eat it, you're going to become like gods and you won't die, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Gotcha.
Good
Okay. Well,
the
mind, these things are going to lie to you. They're going to tell you whatever you want to hear. That should be a kind of a red flag. It's probably not going to be a red flag for people. But at the end of the day, Vicky, you're right. They envy us so much. It's a deep envy. The difference between envy and jealousy is envy is like, I'm going to keep you from having that thing at all possible cost. That's how bad. But at the same time, they actually want to see God and they want to know him. And that is a really weird paradox that isn't fully understood, probably because there's no words in any language to explain it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's at the same time, BT, it's so convicting to me as I look at my own heart and the things on a daily basis that I get distracted by, stupid temporal things that, this too shall pass, right?
Yeah.
Worried every day about things that in eternity aren't going to matter. It is extremely convicting to me to know that where my heart should be, that people that hate him and are going to be separated from him for eternity have the ability to ponder and agonize over the loss of seeing his face, when that's what I'm supposed to be doing every day, is agonizing with birth pains to see his face. And I can't even do that because I'm so distracted with stupidity and self-centered things and temporal things. And then here are these wicked things that actually have the ability to agonize over wanting to see his face. Like I don't even know what to do with that. That's so that my brain's doing a couple somersaults here with that.
Absolutely.
BT, looking back, can you kind of see the setup or the vulnerability that you had when that happened with your grandparents? I've heard so many stories that are similar. Like some of them might be a parent died or somebody died, and somebody became angry with God, and they just began getting into trouble or rebelling or something like that. And when you look back, it's almost like the enemy was waiting, in the wings for that perfect moment. And one, was there anything that kind of preceded that? Like that maybe the enemy knew he had an opportunity with you, like an interest in these things when you're growing up Christian, or was it just kind of out of left field?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tom. I grew up I'm an 80s kid, so I grew up through the 80s and the 90s. And let's see, if I was 15, that would have been 96. So before 96, well, I was really big into horror movies, if that's going to answer your question. I really like John Carpenter. And if that was a kind of an indicator, maybe here's your stepping off stone into entertainment. Video game violence wasn't as big of a thing as it was today. You can't really say me stomping on some Koopa's head as Mario is going to lead me to violence.
What about music, BT? Was your music dark as well? We talk about that a lot.
No.
Really?
At the time, we had a radio station, Q105. It's gone now. It's somebody else, but popular music, regular run of the mill, whatever was popular. So Michael Jackson, Prince, MC Hammer, Vanilla Ice.
Yep.
Really aging myself there, right? I mean, Tina Turner.
Hey, slow down. I got a bunch of songs I want to sing.
No, you leave it alone, Tom. But that was the whole thing. The music wasn't part of it, Tom. What was part of it was, see, what happens is the enemy starts to slowly give you visual things to look for. Okay, this is one of the tactics of the enemy. It makes me feel like I'm Wormwood here, right? Talking, C.S. Lewis here. No, the enemy, what it wants to do to us is it can put things audibly into our ears where we can hear things that aren't us or someone we know. It can say things to us, but it can also give us visual things. You could be walking along the street and see a tarot card, if you've seen tarot before, there on the ground, and it isn't there. But your mind perceives and goes, oh, and these little clues start to add up in your mind, and they are their keys to your lock, and they want to open the mind up to being receptive.
Yeah.
Hopefully that is an answer for the question.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, BT, were you kind of a lone practitioner, or did you practice with other people?
No, I stayed away from other people. I was driven more and more to being by myself. I stopped seeking out people to help me find books because I didn't need them. I was experimenting on my own, and I simply did what was beginning to feel natural, unnaturally. Yeah. No, I couldn't stand being around other people for the longest time.
So, with this profile that you're describing, sounds really dark, okay? And we could say a lot of things about this profile. Very isolated, involved in the occult, and to the point where your skin is pale and you're not looking healthy at all. And we've seen movies about people like this that are dark. What is there anything that kind of freaks you out, like as far as just thoughts that you had, or they say sin will take you further than you ever wanted to go. Like, is there anything that kind of freaks you out when you think back about what you could have done?
Well, that's the grace of God, really, that when I was immersed in those waters, all that was forgiven. It's all gone. Any of the potentialities, any of the guilt is just gone. I was washed into the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. And I typically don't spend a whole lot of time commiserating or longing for the good old days, because they were not good old days. They were dark days, and not filled with there wasn't a whole lot of love there for me and other people. I didn't really care for people the way that I began to once I learned about how to love really from Christ. Yeah, no, it was not good. Not good to think about. Usually went through a lot of nightmares, a lot of nightmare times, and depression.
Well, since you brought that up, BT, that kind of goes into some of my line of research. I think I always talk about there's the list of side effects to medication that the new age people never want to talk about. It's the hey, you get all this power and you'll do all this, and then there's the disclaimer at the end, like you may experience sleep paralysis, nightmares, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's what nobody wants to talk about. It's the dirty little secret. Nobody wants to talk about that stuff until they become a Christian, and then they say, yeah, while I had 2 million people signed up to my site, and I was a medium, and I was doing all this psychic stuff, and I was talking to the Council of 8 and all this stuff, they don't tell you about the nightmares, the depression, the psychotropic medication, the relationship failures, the sleep paralysis, the demons showing up in the room. What are some of these elephants in the room that nobody wants to talk about? If there's someone who stumbles on the show and thinks, oh, I want to get a book on magic, that's going to be great, what are the side effects that are not being advertised?
Well, the glitz and the glam is the draw. Shiny colors usually gets people interested. What's in the darkness, what's kept in the dark, away from the light, is typically the emotional responses that you have to justify. You have to tell yourself that it's okay to feel lust. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay to just not feel like you want to get up and do anything worthwhile. Sloth, basically. These are the realities of the situation. Is some days when you're peddling the sinister forces, they're peddling you, really. The dopamine, the endorphins, all of the good feeling things don't hit your system and give you any boost emotionally. You don't get the positives. Sleep, you might as well forget about that, because you're not going to have a very good night's sleep after a while, because you think you didn't light the candle at the right time, or you didn't burn the incense correctly. Wrong incense. You used the wrong rock.
Oh.
You wrote the wrong word down. You burnt the paper too soon. And you have to do better next time, and it wasn't good enough the next time. And
oh my gosh, the bondage.
Yeah, bondage.
Wow.
You're bound. You're bound to something that just doesn't care about you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a type of anxiety, I guess, if we could call it that I've never even thought of before. Just second guessing everything that you are doing would be enough to drive you crazy. You mentioned something there. I want to kind of back you up. Just the idea of, it's okay to feel lust, or to experience that, or whatever. The other things that you mentioned. What I tell people? It's normal. You're a human being. When you're tempted with those things, and when the enemy can use those to attack, you're in good company. And we can look at people like Elijah, okay, who was a warrior and took on the prophets of Baal. But then there was another point where he was kind of like, okay, I give up. He released his servant, and he just wanted to die. Okay. And we've been there. We've been fatigued. We've been just beat up and tired, and don't want to do anything. And I always tell people, you're in good company if you feel that way. It's okay to feel that way. It's not okay to stay that way.
Yeah. Or act. If you're starting to feel lust, not to go to the porn site, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So, BT, I want to, I might think of something else to jump back and ask you, because I know that people are curious, and there are people that listen to this show that have kids and grandkids, and just maybe associates of people they know, or they know somebody at church that is dealing with this, and they have a child that's getting involved in this. So we try to get as much information as possible, but I want to kind of know, like, what you're doing now. You have a podcast, and can you just kind of share some of that?
Absolutely. I launched Truth and Shadow because a podcast, as I wanted to give an opportunity to start laying out the groundwork and proving that it's real. The biggest lie Satan ever told anybody was that he didn't exist. And I'm here to say that's a lie. Just as big of a lie as when he told Eve when she was tempted for the fruit in the garden. It's just another lie being told by the enemy. Satan's very much real. He's got a bunch of dudes working with him, be them fallen angels, be them the unclean spirits from the Nephilim. They're working with him, and they're working overtime, and they're seeming to be working double time, like you've said, in the last 5 years or so, really driving home. And my goal was basically to engage that ancient serpent, to bring the fight back onto the battlefield and show that the war hasn't been won. We know that we win in the end, but these battles, and the grandparents or the parents that are dealing with children who are losing or lost or walked away from the faith, etc., that sometimes God permits these things to happen to them. And that sounds kind of weird because we've got a loving God. And that's my point of my podcast, is to show, yeah, we have a loving God. Bad things happen. A village is going to get wiped out by a mudslide, except for one little girl who survives because it's a village of sinners, right? And we read about that, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So we know these things. God does these things to save other people. And the aim of Truth and Shadow was to be a nautical lantern in the dangerous seas of darkness that we seem to have found ourselves in. We're in the boat, we're on the waters, just like Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee, and he's there in the boat. We're in that boat. He's there in the boat with us. We just need to be brave enough to stand up against the storm. Truth and Shadow is where it comes in, is I'm not afraid to say that a lot of the things that we don't understand today is because we don't understand what they understood sitting in that boat, what the apostles grew up with, because Jesus came at a specific time. That was no accident. That means something. And I started to talk about this is Second Temple period stuff. This is a time when we need to really be looking at who we are in Christ and where we can go in our fight. And that's Truth and Shadow.
Wow, that's amazing. I don't want this to sound like a wrap up, because we can go through this at the end too. But since we're on this now, can you let us know all the places we can find you and where we can connect with you if we want to listen or contact you?
Absolutely. I have a website. It's truthandshadow.org. And the best thing to do is click the Listen Now button. And that's going to bring you to my Transistor site. This is my home webpage on my pod distribution company here. This is going to give you who I am. This is going to give you the podcast that I currently think a listener who finds me should listen to first. I'm beginning something really new. Last week I dropped one. It's called a Shadow Short, and it's designed. The Shadow Shorts are specifically on spiritual warfare. That's what they're going to be about. My main episodes are going to be the heavy hitting home base running stuff, but I want people to know what they can do in the fight in their lives, and I give it to them in 15-minute soundbite as opposed to a 45-minute entire episode.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm launching my first interview. I usually do solo episodes where I just talk about things that are on my mind. I'll be interviewing Dr. Heather Lynn. We're going to talk about what's known as evil archaeology. These are things that are in the world today, things that have a sinister thing in them. We talk about an individual, John Lawson, back in 2014, called himself Pazuzu and did some really horrible things it was really, maybe it was 2010, either way. John Lawson changed his name to Pazuzu, and he basically did the Sumerian stuff, and he worshipped Pazuzu and did blood sacrifice and ended up being found in his prison cell of apparent suicide, but the autopsy really doesn't correlate with a self-inflicted death.
That happened in North Carolina, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
They
completely razed that house where those things happened at. I remember that. Yeah.
Basically, if you think about the pictures of the house, when you look at it, that's kind of how I felt inside when I was a kid.
Yeah. Wow. So I remember watching the walkthrough of the crime scene, and the police officers, they said the odor was so bad in the house that they couldn't hardly breathe.
Yeah, human excrement. It was disgusting. Do whatever you want to do. I mean, we're talking levels of stuff that like Charles Manson would have been doing in Laurel Canyon. I mean, this is just disgusting.
Yeah. And they found a couple bodies in the backyard, right?
Yeah, I think he killed his mother. This was his mother's house, and I do believe there are probably reports of cannibalism and Dahmer stuff, and
Wow. Okay. Amazing.
Yeah. But we don't get into those kind of details. We talk about a couple of other things. We talk about some Second Temple period stuff. We talk about King James. I mean, that's we're not gonna get into the gross details. There's no point in that. Someone can, I'm not an infotainment show. I'm an educational program designed to educate, empower, and strengthen your faith.
Yeah.
So, BT, if you could meet your 15-year-old self, or if somebody, were to show up back then and try to reach you, would there have been anything they could have done to reach you? What do you think that you needed to keep you from going down that road?
It's a real powerful question, and I've thought about myself when I was younger a lot. And there's regrets. There's things that I wish never happened. There's circumstances that happened to me that I wish never happened. But Tom, without those things happening, I wouldn't be who I am today. Those were formative years. They designed, strengthened, and developed me to become BT, host of Truth and Shadow podcast. It wasn't anything that anybody could have said in those times to be able to pull me out. I wouldn't have wanted it. I needed to go through that, Tom. I really did. Vicki, I needed to go down a dark road and come out the other side.
100%. I think this isn't a dig on all of evangelical Christianity by any means, but our modern sermons on the sovereignty of God in suffering are really lacking.
Yeah.
God is sovereign, and there's a difference between him maniacally laughing with no empathy as we're going through things and him staying his hand and letting us go through certain things because it's going to bring us into maturity, into the place he needs us. And we need to be prepared for the ministries that he's chosen for us. And so if you're going into frontline ministry, if you're doing anything with spiritual warfare, if you're doing anything where you've got the target on your back, if you have not tested and proven your armor, like David wouldn't wear Saul's armor, I look at all the trials and the traumas and the heartaches and the sorrows and the losses in my life. Yeah, I don't want to do them over again. And they were very, very difficult. But it was the testing of that armor. Now I can put the armor on and I can go out to the fight because I've tested it and I know that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of Bible verses to help for people. Since we're Christians, I might as well share them. I've got Philippians 3:10 and 11 open. I had that one ready. I was going to talk about that. So not to interrupt you, Tom.
Please.
But Philippians 3:10 and 11, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection, and may share his sufferings, becoming like him in his death, that by any means possible I may attain the resurrection from the dead. And then Paul had written, Peter, 1 Peter 4:13, that that we are to enter into the victory that Jesus bore for us on the cross. And that means giving our sufferings to Jesus, but participating in the sufferings of Christ.
I don't know very many people who have people that have been through some horrific things, and they find a way to give thanks to God and to recognize that God had his hand on them, even in those times, protecting them and rescuing them from death.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will hear people say, you know what? This was a horrific thing, but it got me back to God. I know a family member that said this to me years ago, and I was consoling them because they went through a divorce, and he said, man, that ripped my heart out, but it got me back to God.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 5:5, I do believe it, where Paul's talking about toss them out, toss that sinner out of your community and turn them over to Satan so that their flesh may be rent or whatever it is, but that they may come back to Christ. It's very poignant.
Yeah. And when I think of a verse like that, that's not natural for me to pray that prayer. Okay. Especially when I'm praying for a family member.
Yeah.
I don't think about, okay, turn them over to the devil,
Right. Here you go.
Yeah. I have a lot of different prayers, like, Lord, protect them, rescue them, save them now, and for anybody that heard, it was about a month ago, my son came on and gave his testimony, and he was running for 11 years from 18 to 29. And I watched this from afar with a broken heart, but man, I am telling you, he is on fire for the Lord right now, and he is studying the Bible and taking classes, Russ Dizdar classes, and
Nice.
he's recruiting other people to take Russ Dizdar classes. He's calling people up and telling them, so as horrific as that was and hard as it was, I mean, I did pray. I said, Lord, I want my family to be used in ministry. And but anyway, BT, of course that verse is true, and God, he answers prayer in this way.
Absolutely. Sometimes God will send the diabolical things to us to get us to come back to him. He is the ultimate one in charge. He is the power and the authority over all of these dark forces on the planet, really.
I think one of the disservices, talking about the law of unintended consequences, I know we all like the sermons that talk about how Jesus loves us and he forgives us.
Of
and,
course.
We love all those sermons, but the disservice we've done ourselves as a body of never talking about these more difficult things is that we've sort of developed this mentality that the end goal of a good Christian walk is happiness and success. And biblically, we find out that the ultimate goal of our faith is to be made Christ-like and to be holy. And that requires purging, and it requires the gardener to come with shears and lob branches off, the amputations of, and sometimes the branches that get lobbed off, looked really beautiful and they had some flowers on it and it would have bore a little bit of fruit, but it has to be pruned. And so we know that God has pruning shears and he has refiner's fire, and a lot of the metaphors in scripture are graphic. It's marathon runners, who are puking their guts out at the finish line, and people who have to sell everything that they've owned. And there's tons of military examples and metaphors. And so we have to shift our focus that the end goal of our faith is becoming like Christ and selling everything that we own for that treasure in the field. In other words, departing from this idea of accumulating all of our wealth here on planet Earth. And so I think that God is not going to look as mean and ornery and cruel and contradictory if we start to understand what the true end goal of our faith is. It's not that everything gets worked out down here and your spouse never leaves you and you have the perfect job and you keep getting promotions and all your kids are perfect. We are never going to understand the love of God if we don't understand how it manifests in our life, because sometimes it manifests through the suffering.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just want to say, hey, I'm seeing some really cool comments and stuff happening in the chat, and just relevant to what we're talking about tonight. And people can relate with the things that are being said. And just appreciate everybody. Guys, thank you for subscribing and supporting and everything that you guys do and showing up in the chat. Just appreciate everybody. So, BT, we just want to give you a chance just to kind of share anything, on your heart that that you want to get across, maybe to somebody out there that could be listening that is involved in the occult? What would you say to them?
Well, that's a really good question, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand really well the draw and the freedom that these things make you feel like you have. But is it really freedom you've got?
Mm.
I only really need one book to read. Just the Bible. I don't need to buy the next thing written by Aleister Crowley to make myself understand some kind of spiritual. I've got Jesus, and that really seems to be enough. And I feel more free after being baptized than I've ever felt before. What do we do then? Well, I do know that in our darkest moments and our times of vulnerability, when we are not in control, that the hardest thing for us to get over is that fear of being alone. And I know that fear has driven so many people to taking the easy way out. I've known people who were in Wicca, were in practicing pagan, non-name pagan beliefs. There's a million of those out there who just simply decided to make an eternal answer for a short-term problem. And that's not cool. And I know it's all because of being afraid. And I would tell people who are afraid because they're not in control that it's time to learn what surrender is, and how to surrender is to come to Jesus. Come talk to me. I've been through it. I know what it's about. I know how to get over it. And Lord willing, anybody who's wrapped up in it will too. Even if it takes 10, 15, 20 years. One day they'll step out.
Amen.
BT, I hear so many encouraging testimonies, and we see the other side of that too. We get discouraged when we hear about somebody being involved in these things, or whatever, somebody falling away, or just a life destroyed. But there are so many testimonies of people exiting the occult, finding the truth in the gospel, and being changed from the inside out by God's word. So, folks, I would just say, don't give up. Keep praying. Who's the person in your life that you think is least likely to find God? Pray for that person. Put your faith to the test. Just say, Lord, you know what? This might seem kind of crazy, and this is out of my comfort zone, but I'm going to go pray for so-and-so because I'm struggling with faith, but I'm going to step out in faith and say, God, you can rescue this person. Your ways are better than my ways, and you can do more than we ask or imagine. So I'm asking and just casting doubt aside and saying, Lord, I believe you can reach this person, and you can convict this person, and that you can just change the circumstances in their life and save them. So I just want to encourage you, don't give up on the prodigals. Don't give up on that person at work that you know is involved in the things that we're talking about tonight, right? So, we just want to encourage you in every way. BT, once again, can you just give us the website and all the connections and the podcast again?
Absolutely.
I want people to be able to go check that out.
Once again, the website's truthandshadow.org. I have a couple of other things you can go to. I do have my Truth and Shadow Facebook. I do have an Instagram associated with this. Those are all linked on the truthandshadow.org website. I also co-host Unrefined with Brandon and Lindsay. Oh. So there's a couple of episodes. You can go over there. January 4th, my testimony is dropping on their site. I've done a couple of logical fallacies with the guys. I've done 2 episodes. We've got one on Leviathan. We're going to talk about that force and whatever else comes along the table. So I'm doing Truth and Shadow, and that's my Sirius website, our Sirius podcast, and I'm doing Unrefined to get out there and share some more fun stuff. It's not all
Awesome.
That's
darkness.
amazing.
It's
That's
truth,
right.
man.
That's
Vic,
awesome.
I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, BT, thank you so much for coming on. This show just met and exceeded my expectations. We're leaving our 2023 season here with a bang, and you've just given me personally some things to really contemplate, just by way of wanting in 2024 to deepen my affections for Christ. And you know, I've walked with the Lord my entire life, and yet it's always a journey. And I just love the fact that people like you can come on here and encourage us, and you definitely did that. And thank you just so much for coming on. And
Thank you.
I know our paths will continue.
And thank you to all the
cross.
listeners. I see your comments.
Oh, good.
As I end every podcast, you are the light in the darkness.
Amen.
Thank you. Hey, thank you
Amen.
so much, BT. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. God bless everybody, and we will see you next time. All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy.